How do you start a tech company and end up sparking a revolution in cycling?
Ben Prioto, their CTO at the time, called me and said, Chip, I've got Chris Froome, Bradley Wiggins, and they're on the Kickrs and they love them. And I gotta be honest, I didn't know who these guys were.
How do you take on a multi-billion-dollar Goliath and succeed?
It was a big push to go after the 800-pound gorilla.
We have athletes building products for athletes, and so we truly understand the psyche of the user.
I've come to the headquarters of Wahoo in Atlanta, Georgia, to find out. And I'm going to sit down with the founder and the CEO to find out how Wahoo Fitness have made such a name for themselves and changed the cycling landscape, because they have, as you'll see. So I'm on my way to Wahoo's HQ. It turns out that Atlanta is the 9th most congested city in the US. But actually, it's pretty great for riding. It's even got a velodrome. There's a strong riding culture, and I think that's mirrored in Wahoo's own workforce. Apparently 90% of them ride bikes, and I'm hoping to see a fair few out on their famous lunch ride today. This then, tucked into a leafy Atlanta suburb, is Wahoo's global headquarters. Now, first thing is first, how good is their coffee? Tell you what, top marks, choice of 3 coffee machines. Which is the best one?
At the moment, this one. This is technically the best, but she broke.
Not just a choice of coffee machines, but their own flipping beans. Look at that. Roasted by a local roastery. Right, better get changed. In the early days of the company, Wahoo occupied just a tiny corner of this building. But over the years, as the law firms and the accountancy firms that originally they'd shared this place with moved out, so Wahoo have expanded and created this absolutely mega space. They've got the gym, they've got the kitchen, they've got the breakout spaces, the meeting rooms, they've got the offices, of course, and also a whole load of tech labs as well. 85 people work at the HQ here, split into engineers, mechanical, electronic and software, plus customer services, marketing and sales, and other departments too. We will dive into some of the nerdy engineering stuff later, but I'm really struck by just how much of the HQ is given over to product development. There is cool stuff everywhere you look. There's also a Christmas tree, which I'm told is not early, but very, very late. But it carries on around here as well. You just can't help but get the feeling that innovation is just absolutely everywhere in this building. How cool is this, right? This TV is currently showing a heat map of all of the Wahoo head units in use at the moment that are live tracking their situation. So we've got 1,550 activities in progress right now. Look at that, Delaware. It's going off in Delaware right now. And New York. First, I've got an appointment with the founder of the company, Chip Hawkins, to find out what led him to start a fitness tech company and how he managed to make it a success. So Chip, can we go back to the beginning, right? So what's your background and how did you come to start Wahoo Fitness?
So I'll give you the not incredibly long version. I'm a mechanical engineer, entrepreneur, sort of a jack of all trades, always have been. I was running a boat dock business in North Georgia. I love swimming, boating, and that was where I was. I got into triathlons and fitness during a downturn in the economy when I had spare time in my dock business. And in that process, bought all the gear for cycling and hated it. Buying the little yellow computer with the PowerTap power meter and a Garmin head unit and having them not talk, like things that you take for granted today just didn't work back then. And so I I just was completely frustrated with it. So the very first thing I did was just build this little radio plug that went in the old iPhone 30-pin connector, and it enabled Ant Plus to get into my iPhone. And so I could get power and GPS and heart rate all together. And it was really just a hobby. In the dock business where we're building $40,000 boat docks, I started working on $80 little Ant keys that plugged into iPhones and selling them from up in our office up there. And that's kind of what got it started.
And what was it from your previous businesses that gave you the knowledge to be able to engineer that, which presumably is quite a complicated bit of tech, right? Or it sounds like it is to me.
Yeah, so I was sort of a software hacker, not a hardware hacker at all. I had a couple of guys there at the dock business that were like me, just tinkerers. I had no right to build it. I just figured it out and learned. I'm still a decent electrical engineer now,
right.
but no formal education that gave me the right to do it. It's just entrepreneurial. I just needed it, so I figured it out.
Wow,
really the way. Yeah.
That is cool. And what came next then after those initial products?
So there was the key, and then we made the case, and then I initially thought everyone already has heart rate monitors and power meters, but it turns out that when they bought this stuff from us and they weren't buying a Polar watch or a Garmin watch, they needed those. So the next products were all the accessories that went along with it: speed and cadence sensor, heart rate monitors. We were packaging them up in bundles and selling them at Best Buys and Apple stores and that sort of thing. All the while, I'm training for duathlons and triathlons and riding on a CompuTrainer and just desperately hating it because I couldn't get any good data. I couldn't communicate with any of the apps that we were doing. So that's kind of when the Kickr started coming into my head.
I've heard it said that the Kickr essentially sparked the indoor training revolution in cycling. Would you agree with that?
I think it did. I mean, I remember thinking, how many of these can we sell? Is it really a good idea to make it? And the market data suggested, I think there were like 20,000 trainers a year sold in the US or something. And so I was like, there's no way we're going to sell more than 500 of these or 1,000 of these. And, lo and behold, we sold, many, like orders of magnitudes more than the market. So it made training indoors practical and fun, where I think the only people that used to do it were people that were really dedicated and they didn't enjoy it.
No.
And so it did. It definitely sparked a revolution and kind of built a category. And we've really enjoyed the benefits of that.
I'm loving this little museum section as a bit of a nerd out. So some of the products that Chip was talking about, this is that very first Ant Plus key that plugged into the bottom of an iPhone. The product that started it all, this was the iPhone case. You can see it was pretty bomb-proof. Over here, the first ever head unit, this was the Reflect, and it basically mirrored what was going on your phone and then allowed you to see it on your handlebars, so your phone could stay in your pocket, nice and safe. That's super neat, that. Still think that's a great idea. And then, how good is that? One of the original Kickr prototypes, unmistakably a Kickr. It makes you think that they pretty much got it right first time. You can tell how long ago this is. That's got a 10-speed cassette on there. I've actually got to take these home. This is one of Connor's new pedals for his bike. So, finally got one to fit. Sorry, Connor, I'm sorry.
Even in those formative years, Wahoo were managing to attract attention. From two guys who harnessed the power of the Kickr and then went on to start a little company called Zwift, to, at the time, the biggest team in pro cycling.
Talk me through how the partnership with Team Sky came about, because that was the first time I heard of Wahoo, and I remember at the time being like, who are these guys, and like, how on earth are they sponsoring Team Sky? I imagine you must have been a giant of a company at that point to be able to get in there with, at the time, the world's biggest team.
I think there were about 8 of us in the company, maybe 10. No, it was the opposite. I had gotten the first, I think we got like 10 Kickrs in the very first prototype stage. And I worked real close with the guys at Training Peaks in Boulder. And so we sent 3, and they were using them in their lab because they had more cyclists than we had to test and use them. And Ben Priota, their CTO at the time, called me and said, Chip, I've got Chris Froome, Bradley Wiggins, and their coach here, and they're on the Kickrs and they love them. And I got to be honest, I didn't know who these guys were. I was a triathlete in Atlanta, Georgia, and he said, but they want to take them with them. Is that okay? And I was like, no, I've only got like 10 of them. He's like, you don't understand. This is like Bradley just won the Tour de France. I was like, all right, they can have them. And so it was an incredible experience. So they took them. They started training on them. They were sponsored by another trainer company, but they were like hiding behind plywood barriers at the World Championships. Chris, the next week, they sent me photos of him like training on the Kickr right before the World Championship time trial. So that was super. And so that was very, for years, that was just like, they didn't pay us any money. We just gave them Kickrs.
No way.
It was a very, like, they loved the Kickr. We love learning from them. So it was a very natural sponsorship. And it worked really well. I mean, I think we still probably are better known in the UK than we are here as a result of Team Sky back then.
Yeah.
So.
Man, that's the kind of endorsement that brands can only dream of, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's talk about head units then, because I guess that came next, right?
It did, and it's kind of ironic because I was still using my iPhone, and I'd ride with my iPhone with our app back in the day, and I'd ride with a bunch of serious cyclists, and they were so intrigued looking at my iPhone because I had really cool data on there. I connected to everything, but no one would consider putting their iPhone on their handlebars. It was just like, we don't do that. We have to have a head unit. And I had ridden with Garmin's for years, and I just was frustrated with everything about it, the interface, and so we finally just said, okay, we'll build a dedicated device. It was a big push to go after the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in that because, Garmin are big, right? And fitness only represents a fairly small proportion of their business, right? So they've got a huge amount of resource, I'm guessing, behind it. So did you consider it to be a risk to go up against them?
Yeah. But it was, we were in the space. We had products in the space, and I knew that we could build a better product. And so it was a risk worth taking.
Now, even more important than judging the coffee, the best way of gauging just how cool a bike brand is by working out what proportion of the staff are riding and whether they're allowed to ride during work hours. Let's see who's out today, shall we? Photo. Tell you what, very nice in these parts. They've also organised a police outrider for today. Apparently something the local cops are happy to do. And we're just cruising through this absolutely gorgeous part of Atlanta.
As a company gets more successful, as it manages to take on that 800-pound gorilla, that growth brings with it certain challenges. One of which is how you maintain the culture, whether that's the passion or the innovation or simply the agility. To find out, I also got time with the man who has recently taken over the top job at Wahoo, Gareth Joyce, as he prepares to lead them to the future.
So Gareth, relatively recent addition to Wahoo. What drew you here in the first place?
I studied mechanical engineering, grew up in South Africa. I did a business degree. I spent the vast majority of my career working for Mercedes-Benz, traveled around the world working for them. I've been a cyclist and a runner from, I think, about when I was 10 years old. So as an enthusiast and a user of the kind of products and equipment that we produce, it was very easy for me to get excited about this business. The innovation behind the business and the products translated into a value proposition for me as a user and a customer. And I think I experienced this before I joined the company, which is the products really do translate a training experience far better from the outdoors into an indoor training environment than any other brand I experienced as somebody that had been through different brands over the years. You've seen it, you've walked around here, people live and breathe what we do. I mean, we have athletes building products for athletes, and so we truly understand the psyche of the user. Like, it's really like embedded in the DNA of the people here. You can feel it. And so how do you preserve that? How do you keep that? There's like a purism in the energy that comes from that. And so you've got to nurture and preserve that, yet at the same time, acknowledge that you've got these responsibilities of growing up as a business.
How do you do that? Because that is quite a challenge, I think, isn't it?
We try and do the things that we've always done as a business. We're Fridays, pizza days, everybody gets around the table, family style, and we talk and laugh and joke and share experiences of the past weekend's athletic activities, as an example. Like, those things, you got to actively work at protecting them. And then on the other hand, you've got to work at having people understand that the more complexity you have in your business, sometimes you need process and process discipline and process rigor, which may be uncomfortable, but without it, things can get chaotic.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No. As promised, let's dive in to some of the nerdy stuff, shall we? Up here, there are some really cool tech labs with some very interesting things going on. In here is the mechanical engineering lab. So this, Andrew, is the lab technician. Can you talk us through what goes on in this amazing room?
A little bit of everything. So whenever we are working on new products, I get early versions of them and see how well they're working, if they're going together correctly, if I have any sort of suggestions that need to be made, a different bolt here, a washer there, etc. A lot of data collection, kind of cut a broad swath through all of our products and try and make them better.
Cool. So talk me through some of the kit you've got in here then. 3D printer?
3D printer. We've got a thermochamber for essentially testing our devices in extreme environments, hot or cold.
And what is this?
This is a small wind tunnel. Wind tunnel time is very expensive, so it really made sense to see if it was actually something we needed to do before we went out and actually got a full lab wind tunnel time.
Does it work?
It does work.
The reason for this wind tunnel will become clear in the coming weeks, as Wahoo have some exciting stuff in the pipeline, but which I've been sworn to secrecy over.
Inside this room behind the glass is the dynamometer, and basically what we do with this is measure what our devices are capable of doing as far as power targets are concerned. So if we want, say, to be able to hit a 1500 watt sprint, we need to make sure that our trainer can do that, and this is how we go about that. We put a commanded torque value into the unit, and it also measures what we're actually getting back out of that at the same time.
Over here, we've got the electrical engineering lab. Joe, hello.
Simon.
All right. So, I'm guessing what happens in here is electrical engineering.
Brilliant,
right?
yes.
Now, you obviously can't see what's going on that bench because it's top secret, but what are you actually doing in here? What does electrical engineering constitute?
So some of the stuff we do, like you'll see we've got a board here out of one of the Kickrs. This is where we do all the prototyping. If problems come up with things, we'll put test wires on them. There's a multimeter. There's a whole bunch of electrical stuff going on. So
literally soldering stuff onto
literally
circuit boards.
Soldering iron over here. You've got all the other equipment you might need to do the tests that you might need to do, and a lot of the design work happens in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
None of this means anything at all to me. It's totally alien, but I'm blooming glad that it exists. So thank you.
Yeah. Lucky I'm the professional and I know all about this stuff.
Of course you do, yeah. And in here is the QA lab. This is Gregory. Gregory, your nickname is the Meat Dino.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
So you've already seen the dyno in the mechanical lab. So I would be the meat version of it. So
like the human guinea pig?
Yes, the human guinea pig. So we will validate things initially on the dyno that you saw in the ME lab, and then eventually that'll make its way over here, and I will perform often the same tests up to my physical ability with my legs. So
okay, so 1,500 watts for 20 minutes?
No, not that much, but maybe 400 watts for like 2 minutes.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. There's an awful lot of bits in here.
This is our automation test bed. So anytime a firmware update gets pushed through by our firmware engineers or developers, these devices will run through a suite of automated tests and just make sure everything's working as it should.
Is this one of your workouts?
Yes. By Bart over in data science over in the Netherlands he's a cyclist, so he's nice, but he won't make me do anything too crazy. But
I hope they feed you well here if you're doing this.
Yeah, you notice all the snacks. So, yeah.
There is such a buzz about this place. I mean, any talk of software engineering or electrical engineering still goes way over my head. Although I do understand a little bit more about how they do things now. But the culture here, I totally get. And I like it. Now, call me a romantic, but I love it when a company that makes things for cyclists has cycling running through its core. Although, I have been told there is one last thing that I need to try before I go home. This is the Kickr Run, which Wahoo are hoping is going to do for running what the Kickr has done for cycling. And by all accounts, is getting rave reviews. But can we be clear? I mean, it is still running, right? I mean, anyway, huge thanks to Wahoo for having us today. It's been an absolute blast. If you've liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to GCN as well if you like this type of content. I'm gonna get back on my bike now.